surprisingly, this story wasn't our lead. From the Daily Caller, Biden admin plans on advising Ukraine to hand over territory to Russia. This is an effective surrender of the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. And I couldn't believe it when I read this, because the AP's headline, I wonder if the Daily Caller has the link to the Associated Press article. The AP's headline did not, actually, I think we can pull it up. Let's see what they have the headline as. Biden assures Ukraine's leader of U.S. support to deter Russia. That's their headline. And everybody sees that and they're like, okay, sounds like we're good in Eastern Europe, right? And then you scroll down in the article and it says administration officials have suggested that the U.S. will press Ukraine to formally cede a measure of autonomy within its eastern Donbass region, which is now under de facto control by Russian-backed separatists who rose up against Kiev in 2014. So there is a group in eastern Ukraine that are backed by the Russians, armed by the Russians, that view themselves as completely separate, want to join Russia, and Biden's response to the buildup of troops by Russia is, let them have it. That's crazy to me. Now, I want to stress this point. If this avoids U.S. or EU conflict in the region and a ground war, probably a good thing. But I suppose there's a line. I don't know where it is. I agree with Tucker. We shouldn't care about Ukraine's borders over our southern border, which is porous and busted. But I'm worried about another Afghanistan situation where Joe Biden, he's sitting there in the command seat, and then Vladimir Putin racks up 90,000 troops, and Biden goes, Ukraine, just give it to him. Just give him the territory. And it's like, here we go again. Could there be a better way? Look, under Trump, this stuff wasn't happening. And what did Trump do? He sold weapons to Ukraine, and Putin backed off. Putin takes Crimea. Trump gets elected. Putin backs off. Biden gets in. Putin comes back and says, I take.
Yeah, I don't think Biden's calling the shots here. I think there's...
think Putin's got compromat?
I think there's a long geopolitical, neoconservative Pentagon establishment that does call the shots, and there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a trade-off here, if there's a bigger deal here. The United States did give Ukraine $2.5 billion of weaponry. They have been very active in the region. They have had success turning Ukraine, that had its sphere of influence with Russia, towards the European Union. So this is a very complex picture. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds from here. Obviously, I prefer diplomacy over hot war, and I think we should avoid hot war no matter what. I think the larger geopolitical picture... well, you know what I mean. I think we don't need neoconservatives in charge threatening nuclear war, and we have that right now, a part of the U.S. government threatening the Russian government. I don't think that helps the situation at all. So I think diplomacy is key here, and I think all of America's foreign policy, especially the way it's been run under Trump and now Biden, is shooting itself in the foot and totally counterproductive, and also holds Europe in jeopardy, since of course Europe also depends on a lot of Russian oil and energy that's being shipped towards it right now. So there's a lot at stake here. I still want to see the full picture before jumping the gun and understanding what's really happening here. What about you?
I think this is your point is really, really well taken, because there's all these complex pieces. There's also the piece of like, what are, the Central European countries like Poland,
Yep.
we have both Polish roots. What are they thinking as they're looking? Poland wants to be this big, basically ally to the U.S. And the U.S. is basically doing things like encouraging giving land to the Russians. That's like a huge red flag for the Poles. I mean, Poles have been run, basically the Russians have invaded many times. The Germans have invaded many times. They're expecting the next time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, let me ask you guys, though, is there any circumstance in which you think it would be good for U.S. troops to be on the ground in Ukraine?
That's a very hard decision to make here because of all the pieces here. I would prefer it doesn't happen. I would prefer diplomacy rule here.
I understand that you said that, but my question is, you said, what did you say, at all costs, or avoid war?
I think we should avoid war at all costs.
So what if the cost is like, Russia overtly invades Ukraine to Kiev, and Russian tanks are occupying the capital of Ukraine? Now, I think it's the obvious thing to point out. We are not Ukraine. How much of it is it our business to be like, here's a country that we're sort of friends with, but we're not even a part of the NATO alliance? Should we intervene?
Yeah, genocide. What if the Russians went in and started executing families, children on the street? Lots of media coverage of it. Are we supposed to go and police the world at this point? Is the time done for that? I'm tired of putting our people in harm's way.
I think there's ways of appeasing both sides and calming the situation down without reaching to those types of hyperbolic levels. Now, you made a good point. Poland and other European countries are very set against Russia. Poland even is building a military base called the Trump military base, very close to, of course, the Russian border. So obviously there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of bloodshed. And it's just a horrible situation to deal with that we should avoid the bloodshed.
To me, I'm going to divert the question a little bit because I don't fully know the answer, to be perfectly honest. But what I do know is that what I believe is that the Russians, basically Putin, they only really understand strength as a response. And if you don't use that as is a important tool of your diplomacy, and they are incredibly aware of the fact that you will use whatever tool you have. If they cross the red line and it's a real red line, then they're going to abuse that massively. And I mean, so this, this strategy, this is what they used in Crimea, right? They moved, basically it's this kind of like gray zone warfare, right? Where they move people in. It's not really Russian. There's these people kind of take over with the support, and then suddenly, hey, this is Russia, right? And so how many times do you let that happen? How do you need to support your allies, right?
Right. And that's it. I mean, they took Crimea. Russia took it. Everyone, a lot of people believe, I think it's fair to say, the elections in Crimea were bunk. They came in and said, everybody voted. It's fine. Now Crimea is annexed by Russia because Russia wants their warm water port. But there are hard questions about war, right? And the reason I ask about what Russia is doing and what Biden should do is, I agree, I don't want ground war. I think if Biden is telling them, look, you're going to lose the Eastern Front because we want to avoid war, it's like maybe avoiding war is better. And if the people in the Eastern Front really do want to be, part of Russia, and don't they have the autonomy to decide who they should be governed by or what country they should be a part of? There's really tough questions. But the reason I ask about, war is because right now China's got the Uyghur Muslim camps. And are we declaring war on China? Are we going to be like, it's time to storm the beaches of Macau to make our way to the, Xinjiang, region or whatever?
Right now in the U.S. Congress, were huge efforts being made to water down the provisions that would actually hold, China's activities in Xinjiang to account. It's fascinating. So this is the question, right? So I was just speaking with the former head of human rights, democracy, and labor, for the State Department under Trump, Robert Destro. So there's probably, you could say fairly, there's 3 genocides happening in China right now. There's the Uyghur one. The Uyghur Tribunal just reinforced that reality basically today. And then there's the Tibetans. It's the same model that's been happening for a long time, and against the Falun Gong practitioners as well, an attempt to eradicate, an entire group, not necessarily by killing everybody. That's a later stage of genocide, but through all sorts of means, including these forced sterilizations, and so on and so forth. That's actually interesting. There's this kind of other flip side. They're trying to actually prevent people from getting sterilized in China, but that's a different topic.
Right.
Well, how do you deal? This is the worst thing. This is what we agree. The global community, the free world agrees. It's the absolute worst thing you can do. It's the worst thing, right? Try to eradicate entire groups of people. China's doing one for sure, probably 3.
And they rag on Tucker Carlson for saying, why do we care about Ukraine? They accuse him of defending Putin. The Democrats act like Vladimir Putin is the most powerful evil on the planet. And Russia's like almost nothing to us at this point. Granted, they got a lot of nuclear weapons that I can get, but they've a much smaller population, and China's massive and way more powerful and way more dangerous and committing atrocities.
and way more intertwined financially. And that's the other very serious part of the puzzle,
Yeah.
right?
Well, China is threatening America's hegemony, and the geopolitical picture between Russia and the United States is complicating that and essentially allowing China to win because they have Russia, which is going to be aligning with them when they are naturally competitors. There's a lot of thing that divides Russia and China, and if geopolitically the United States played their cards differently, they could have another strategic ally in the region against their number one allying foe, the number one competitor, that most likely is going to create the Thucydides trap, which we talk about on the show a lot.
Thucydides.
When an emerging power threatens a current power, there's a high likelihood of war, of conflict. So I think on the geopolitical scale, that's a lot more important, especially with the picture of Taiwan, which the United States, geopolitically is kind of ignoring almost outright. So to see this Russian perspective, there's a way that there should be negotiations. We shouldn't just give anything up. We should be tough. We should, control our interests. But we have to also ask ourselves, what were the Russians and Chinese saying when the United States was invading Iraq? When the United States was invading Afghanistan? Were they saying, hey, if they attack this country, this sovereign country that had nothing to do with 9/11, like Iraq, are we going to defend them when they're doing a genocide on their people? And again, I'm not making those arguments, but those were the arguments and conversations that happened in their countries. And we have to understand that those arguments, if we're going to come to a table to try to understand this larger world picture that's unfolding right now, that's extremely complicated.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
United
States took Iraq. China's going to take Taiwan. Russia takes Crimea.
So
Ukraine,
the whole idea of the Genocide Convention, right? Like, I'm not a fan of countries going out nation building, taking over areas. The U.S. any kind of this is not good behavior. Genocide is one of these things. The reason the Genocide Convention exists is because there was a very serious genocide, the Holocaust, right? And people said, we can't allow this to happen. This is something that everybody needs to get involved in internationally. When we see this happening, we really need to act, right? Because this is the worst thing humans do to each other, right?
Yeah. There was we talked about it a bit. There was a post James Lindsay made about what separates a concentration camp from normal forms of imprisonment, and they said it's when someone is detained without due process, when they're taken from their home and put in a camp without due process.
Exactly right.
The escalation, on the other hand, is it depends, right? So that's the idea about what happened in Germany was they were going and taking people and then sending to these camps, which is happening in a lot of different parts of the world, and it's not just China.
Also, a lot of people, a lot of the bigger political establishment in Russia is saying, well, the United States got Libya. They got Syria. They're creating a domestic conflict in Yemen. They had their sphere of influence in Iraq, in Afghanistan. They're getting theirs. We should get ours. So that's the type of conversations that they're having. And I think, again, there's a lot of chess pieces on the table, but we have to reassess what we know, what we're told, because there's a totally different picture that we're not seeing that we should see.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.